New digital scan of the Titanic has offered an unprecedented insight into the ship's final moments. A detailed three-dimensional reconstruction of the wreck reveals engineers worked to keep the lights on even as the vessel sank.
What if the Titanic didn't go dark when everyone thinks it did? Not metaphorically lit. What if, while the decks tilted and the ocean climbed higher, there was still lights burning somewhere inside the ship because a few people refused to stop working? That's the chilling thread running through a new, hyper-detailed 3D reconstruction of the Titanic wreck. Some are calling a full digital twin. And it's not just a prettier picture. This model is so precise that experts can zoom from the size of the ship down to tiny structural details, then measure, compare, and recheck claims that used to live in the blurry space between survivor memory and guesswork. Magellan.gg, +2 National Geographic, +2 and once you realize what that means. The story stops being a ship sank in 1912. It becomes something else entirely. Because the Titanic hasn't just been sitting down there, it's been slowly collapsing, flaking away, being eaten by time. So this scan isn't only about discovering new details, it might be about rescuing the last clear version of the wreck we'll ever have. The wild part is how it was built. The team didn't take a few nice photos and call it a day. They gathered hundreds of thousands of images and laser measurements to stitch together a reconstruction you can explore like a virtual world. National Geographic +2, Smithsonian Magazine +2. It's like someone took the pitch-black ocean floor and turned it into a crime scene. You can finally examine in daylight, except the crime was physics, ice, and a chain of decisions that spiraled into disaster. And once the ship is standing in front of you again, the little details start screaming. Because buried inside the digital twin is a clue that hits harder than any dramatic soundtrack ever could. Evidence that lines up with long-repeated accounts that the engineers stayed at their posts, keeping power running as long as they possibly could. DET, press plus. I think about that for a second. Down in the boiler rooms and electrical spaces, while passengers were being pushed toward lifeboats and the bow kept sinking lower, there were men doing the most thankless job on the ship, fighting to keep pumps, systems, and electricity alive. Not for comfort, for time. For a few more minutes where lifeboats could be launched, signals could be sent, and people could see where they were going. And here's what makes it even darker. That kind of work doesn't come with a clean ending. It doesn't come with applause. If you stay too long, there's no last-second escape. There's only the water winning. For years, that story lived in the world of testimony, believable, but hard to prove in a way that shuts down debate. The digital model changes the conversation because it gives specialists a way to connect the wreck's condition to those final hours in a more forensic, step-by-step way. Smithsonian Magazine +1, and just when you think the scan is only confirming what we already believed, it starts poking holes in the comfortable version of events. The Titanic didn't simply slip under the sea like a stone. It failed. It tore. It broke in a way that people argued about for decades, especially because survivors gave conflicting accounts. Some swore the ship went down intact. Others insisted it snapped in half. And for a long time, the ocean didn't give up enough evidence to settle the argument cleanly. But a digital twin isn't just a fancy tour. It's a measuring tool. It lets experts look at how metal bent, where structural stress likely peaked, and what patterns of destruction imply about the sequence of collapse. Atlantic Studios +1, that's where things get intense. Because the scan isn't one new fact, it's thousands of small, cold facts that stack up. The shape of a torn edge, the orientation of debris, the way certain sections appear crushed versus peeled open. None of it is a headline by itself until you put it together and realize you're looking at the ship's final minutes written in rust and fractures. And that creates a weird kind of discomfort, because it means the Titanic story is still moving. Not in a history's wrong way, in a history's getting sharper way, and sharper truth is harder to sit with. Of course. The internet doesn't do sharper truth. The internet does whispers. The moment you tell people there's a new scan of Titanic, the same rumors crawl out of the shadows every time. They found sealed rooms. They discovered something the public isn't allowed to see. There's proof it was sabotaged. There was secret cargo. There's a hidden chamber. Here's the honest reality. A scan like this is brutally good at showing structure, damage, and layout. It can reveal details you couldn't easily see before. But it's not a magic key that opens locked doors and hands you a secret diary from 1912. The digital twin improves what we can study. especially without physically disturbing the wreck, but it doesn't automatically confirm every spooky story people want to believe. National Geographic +2 Atlantic Studios +2. That said, the rumors aren't coming from nowhere. They come from the same uncomfortable fact. The Titanic wreck is still partly unknown, and it's becoming more fragile every year. So when people hear unprecedented detail, they imagine the ocean finally revealing some forbidden truth. And because we're human, the mind immediately wants the most dramatic version. You've probably heard at least one of the big ones. The ship swap theory, where Titanic and her sister ship were supposedly switched as part of an insurance scam. The coal fire angle, where a fire on board allegedly weakened the hull before the iceberg hit. Or the idea that someone wanted the disaster to happen. None of these are proven by the new scan, so if you see claims online saying the digital twin exposed a grand conspiracy, treat that as what it usually is. People stitching a thriller plot onto a tragedy because it gets clicks. But the scan does something more interesting than a conspiracy. It shows how a real disaster creates mysteries without needing a villain. When a ship this big starts dying, it doesn't die politely. It dies in stages. Water doesn't move like a movie scene. It forces its way through spaces, changes pressure, shifts weight, warps metal, and turns hallways into funnels. That chaos produces strange patterns, objects pushed into odd places, sections that look more intact than expected, and damage that doesn't feel neat. And those oddities are exactly what rumor hunters grab onto. So if you want the real mystery, don't ask, what secret were they hiding? Ask, what did the ship's design, stress points, and failures force to happen next? Because the scan is basically a map of consequences, and that's where the story collides with something even more controversial than rumors: the fight over whether the Titanic should be touched at all. The wreck isn't just a research site. Too many people, it's a gravesite and a memorial. Over 1,500 people were lost in the sinking, and the site carries that emotional weight, whether you're a historian, a descendant, or someone who simply can't shake the tragedy. AP News +1. At the same time, there's an entire world of legal rights and salvage debates swirling around Titanic. A company recognized in U.S. federal court as salver in possession has held exclusive rights to recover artifacts for decades. RMS, Titanic, Inc. And for years, that reality has sparked a question people can't agree on. Is recovering objects saving history, or is it disturbing a memorial? Recently, that argument hit a pause button. Reports indicated the salvage firm said it would not return to the wreck in 2025, and that helped end a legal fight with the US government, at least for now. Popular Science +1. That detail matters for two reasons. First, it shows how tense this topic still is, more than a century later. Second, it explains why digital scanning is suddenly such a big deal. Because a digital twin offers a third path: document everything, preserve what you can in data, and reduce the need to physically intrude. In other words, the scan isn't just a scientific flex, it's also a compromise, a way to learn without grabbing. But even that compromise comes with its own uncomfortable shadow, because the Titanic story can't be separated from modern obsession. And that obsession got a brutal reminder in 2023, when the Titan submersible was lost in a catastrophic implosion during a dive to the Titanic site. AP News +1. After that, public interest spiked again, and so did the pressure on anyone connected to Titanic exploration to justify what they're doing, why they're doing it, and how far they're willing to go. So when you see the new scan and hear unprecedented, understand what's really being asked. Are we studying a wreck, or are we chasing it? Because the ocean doesn't care which one it is. The ocean is taking the ship apart either way. That's the ticking clock part people don't talk about enough. The Titanic is deteriorating. Structures weaken, sections collapse, details that were visible years ago become unrecognizable. And that makes the digital twin feel less like a cool innovation, and more like a last photograph of something slipping away. It also changes the stakes of the debate. If you believe the Titanic should never be disturbed, then a scan is the best possible outcome. Capture as much as you can without contact. If you believe artifacts should be recovered to protect them from total loss, then a scan might feel like a frustrating tease, because it shows what's there but keeps everything out of reach. Either way, the scan forces a blunt truth: time is winning, and it's winning quietly. So what did this digital resurrection really reveal? It revealed a ship that still has the power to shock, not because it's hiding a movie-style secret, but because reality is heavy enough. It revealed evidence that supports the idea that engineers worked to keep power on as long as And that's where it gets even more unsettling, because the scan didn't just give researchers a prettier view of the wreck, it gave them mechanical receipts. One of the details people can't stop talking about is what the model shows around the boiler room area. Experts looking at the scan point to signs that match the old accounts. Engineers kept feeding the system long after it would have made sense to run. The idea isn't that the ship was fine, it's that the electrical power stayed alive long enough to keep key systems running and keep parts of the ship lit while everything else was collapsing around them. Smithsonian Magazine +2people.com+2. And if you're wondering why a 3D scan could possibly reveal that, here's the creepy part. It's the small stuff. The scan's resolution is so high that analysts can check things like the condition and deformation of boilers, and even identify an open steam valve on the stern. Details that suggest the power systems were still being worked. Right near the end, People.com+2, Business Insider +2. It turns the engineers into more than a tragic footnote. It makes their story physical, visible, measurable, and right when you're sitting with that, the scan brings up a second truth people hate admitting. Titanic didn't lose to some giant, cinematic gash ripped down the side. It lost to damage that sounds almost insulting in its simplicity, according to coverage around the digital twin, and the analysis featured in the National Geographic documentary. The iceberg's impact may have caused a series of smaller punctures, spread across multiple compartments, described as roughly a 4 paper-sized when you add it up, but spread in just the wrong way. The ship was designed to survive flooding in a limited number of compartments, and the problem was that the damage crossed to many of them. People.com+2 Business Insider +2. That's the nightmare of it. Not a single dramatic wound, just a handful of small failures stacked perfectly to doom a giant dot. And this is where the scan starts to feel like it's dragging you back into that night, because it lets experts rerun the tragedy with tighter evidence. Not what people think happened, but what the wreck's geometry makes likely. Which brings us to the part that always sparks arguments. The breakup. People have fought about this for decades, whether the ship split on the surface, how violently it happened, what failed first, what the final shape of those minutes looked like. The digital twin can't rewind time like a security camera, but it can do something close. It lets investigators study the torn and twisted structure at full scale, check alignments, and compare failure points in a way older expeditions couldn't. Live Science +2, Business Insider +2, and some of what's being discussed now is intense. Reports around the scan and documentary say the model supports a clearer look at where the ship tore, and how the bow and stern ended up separated on the seabed. It also fuels debate about what happened to the midsection, where the parts failed in ways that looked less like a clean snap and more like a catastrophic structural collapse under extreme stress. Business Insider +2 Live Science +2. But here's where people get it twisted online. When experts say this evidence suggests the internet hears confirmed secret, and those aren't the same thing. So, if you're hearing viral clips claiming the scan proves an explosion or exposes sabotage, slow down. What's actually happening is more grounded and, honestly, scarier. Scientists are narrowing possibilities using physical evidence, not inventing a blockbuster villain. And speaking of villains, this is the moment the rumors usually crawl back in. Because once you tell the public, we have a perfect digital copy of Titanic, people immediately jump to, so what did you find that you're not telling us? You'll see posts claiming there are sealed chambers or untouched rooms or something hidden inside the wreck. Here's the reality. The scan gives extraordinary access to the wreck shape and the debris field around it, but it doesn't automatically unlock every interior space. Titanic's insides are fragile, collapsed, and dangerous to physically enter, and a lot of the digital work is built from external imaging stitched into a full model. That means plenty of the internet's most dramatic theories are still exactly what they've always been stories looking for. Proof. That said, the scan does put you face to face with the human side in a way that's hard to shake, because alongside the wreck structure, the model captures the debris field, personal items scattered across the seabed. And no, this isn't the place for sensationalism. It's the opposite. It's the quiet reality that makes your stomach drop. Shoes, luggage, dishes, fragments of daily life that didn't make it to New York, And when you see that field mapped and preserved digitally, you realize something brutal. The wreck is changing. The objects are changing. The ocean is slowly erasing the evidence of real people. Which is why this digital twin isn't just cool tech. It's preservation. It's basically a way of saving a disappearing site without grabbing artifacts or disturbing the ship itself. National Geographic, +2 ABC, 11 Raleigh Durham +2. And that plugs straight into the ugliest debate around Titanic. Should anyone be down there at all? There's an ongoing push and pull between exploration, preservation, and respect. The Titanic site is treated by many as a memorial, and there are legal frameworks involved, too, especially with the company that holds salvage rights. What's interesting is what happened recently. The US government dropped a legal fight after the salvage firm indicated it had no plans to do dives that would involve entering the wreck in 2025. AP News +2. AP News +2. That detail matters because it shows the direction the world is leaning. Less intrusion, more documentation. And the digital twin fits that shift perfectly. Now layer in one more modern complication, the Titan disaster. After the Titan submersible imploded during a Titanic area dive in June 2023, it didn't just become a tragedy, it became a warning sign. And as of August 5, 2025, the US Coast Guard released a report concluding the implosion was preventable, pointing to inadequate design and systemic safety failures. News.uscg.mil, +2 Reuters, +2. So when people ask, why not just go down there more often? The answer is simple. Because deep-sea exploration is still deadly when corners get cut. The ocean doesn't forgive, and that's why this moment feels like a turning point. The world may be entering a new era where the best way to explore Titanic is to stop physically chasing it and start studying it through the most accurate digital record we can create, which sets up the biggest question of all, one that's way more uncomfortable than any rumor. If we can build a one-to-one digital twin accurate down to tiny structural detail, and we know the real wreck is decaying, are we trying to understand Titanic, or are we racing against its disappearance? Because if it's a race, then the scan isn't the end of the story. It's the starting gun. Reply, continue, and I'll take it into the next stretch. The most haunting details visible in the model. The exact tiny damage/huge consequence chain, and why some experts think we're about to lose parts of the wreck sooner than people realize. The most haunting details in the digital model aren't the broken steel or the massive split between the bow and stern. It's the small things that look almost calm. In the debris field mapped around the wreck, objects appear in patterns that don't scream chaos at first glance. Shoes lying side by side, bottles still upright, pieces of furniture resting as if they were gently placed there. To someone scrolling past an image online, it looks peaceful, but experts say that's exactly what makes it unsettling. These aren't items that drifted slowly to the bottom. Many of them were carried there by violent currents of water rushing through the ship as it sank, then settled in moments when motion suddenly stopped. It's like the ocean hit pause. And once you understand that, the digital twin starts to feel less like a model and more like a frozen second one that captured the aftermath of panic, movement, and final decisions without showing a single person. That's also where the tiny damage, massive consequence idea becomes impossible to ignore, because the scan supports something engineers have quietly known for years. Titanic didn't fail because it was weak. It failed because it was precise. The ship's design depended on exact limits: how many compartments could flood, how much weight could shift, how long systems could function under strain. The iceberg didn't need to rip the hull open like a knife. It only needed to compromise just enough compartments in just the wrong places. Once those limits were crossed, everything else became inevitable. Water didn't simply enter the ship. It migrated. It flowed forward, spilled over bulkheads, accelerated as the bow dipped lower, and increased pressure in ways the designers never imagined would happen all at once. The digital model lets researchers visualize this chain reaction more clearly than ever before, not as a single event, but as a cascade. And cascades don't give you second chances. That's why the engineers' story hits so hard when viewed through this lens. Keeping power on didn't save the ship. It couldn't, but it slowed the cascade. It bought minutes, maybe only a handful, but in a disaster, minutes are everything. And when the lights finally went out, it wasn't because someone gave up. It was because the system itself had reached the point of no return. That realization reframes the entire tragedy. It wasn't arrogance alone. It wasn't fate alone. It was a perfect alignment of design limits, natural forces, and human choices colliding in the worst possible order. And the digital twin makes one last,